The rain in Savannah, Georgia, does not wash things away. It makes them heavier. It presses the humidity against the pavement, releases the scent of old earth and blooming jasmine, and drapes the weeping willows in a silver mist that looks suspiciously like memories trying to take physical form. Cassian Rourke loved this weather. It was the only time the world felt quiet enough for his mind to rest. For a man who had spent the last decade in the arid, blinding heat of desert conflicts, navigating silence was often harder than navigating a minefield. In the desert, silence usually meant an ambush was coming. Here, in the passenger seat of his life, he was learning that silence could just mean peace. He gripped the leather steering wheel of his vintage Ford Bronco, the knuckles of his right hand white, not from stress, but from a lingering habit of readiness. Beside him, Ivana Hale laughed softly, the sound competing with the rhythmic thrum-thrum of the windshield wipers. "You're doing it again, Cass," Ivana said, her voice like a warm anchor pulling him back from the drift. Cassian glanced at her. The dashboard lights cast a soft amber glow on her face. She was beautiful in a way that didn't demand attention, but commanded it. Poised, elegant, the daughter of a prominent judge, and a woman who had never known the specific metallic taste of fear that Cassian had lived with for years. "Doing what?" Cassian asked, his voice gravelly, a permanent souvenir from shouting over rotor blades and gunfire. "Scanning the perimeter," she teased gently, reaching out to touch his forearm. Her fingers brushed against the scar tissue that ran from his wrist to his elbow. "We are on Bay Street, darling. Not a drop zone. And look." She lifted her left hand, catching the street lamp's light. The diamond he had placed there only 2 hours ago shattered the light into 1,000 prisms. "You did good. It's perfect." Cassian forced his shoulders to drop an inch. "I'm glad you like it, Ev. You deserve it. You deserve simple." "Simple is good," she agreed, leaning back. "I want a simple life with you, Cassian. No more deployments, no more classified phone calls, just this." He nodded, though a familiar weight settled in his gut. Simple. He wanted that too. He had fought tooth and nail to reclaim his humanity after discharge. He had gone to therapy, he had started a woodworking business, and he had found Ivana, who represented everything the war wasn't. Safety, structure, predictability. They approached the intersection of Bull Street and Broughton. The traffic light turned yellow, then a stark, bleeding red. Cassian eased the Bronco to a halt. The rain intensified, drumming on the roof. The wipers slapped left, then right, clearing the view for a split second before the water blurred it again. Cassian's eyes performed the automatic sweep he couldn't turn off. Sector 1, storefronts clear. Sector 2, vehicle at 6 o'clock keeping distance. Sector 3, pedestrians on the crossing. He blinked. His breath hitched in his throat, a sudden, violent arrest of air that felt like a physical blow. In the middle of the crosswalk, illuminated by the headlights of a waiting taxi and the strobe of the pedestrian signal, a woman was walking. She wore a long trench coat soaked through, her hair, dark wild curls that defied the dampness, plastered to her cheeks. She held a large umbrella, angling it not over herself, but over the stroller she was pushing with one hand, and the child she was holding with the other. It wasn't just a woman. The profile was etched into Cassian's nightmares and his sweetest dreams, a duality that had haunted him during long nights on watch in the Hindu Kush. The curve of the jaw, the determined set of the shoulders, the way she walked. Heavier on the left foot, a relic of a childhood injury. Lyra Vexley, the woman he had left 4 years ago without a goodbye, only a letter placed on a kitchen counter he knew she would never read in time. The woman he thought he had buried under the necessary debris of a covert life. "Cass? The light is green," Ivana said, her voice sounding like it was coming from underwater. Cassian couldn't move his foot to the gas pedal. He was frozen, his tactical mind racing at 1,000,000 miles an hour while his body remained statuesque. Lyra reached the curb. She turned slightly to usher the child holding her hand up onto the sidewalk. The boy turned. He was wearing a yellow raincoat. The hood had slipped back. Cassian felt the blood drain from his face, leaving him cold and dizzy. The boy had hair the color of rusted copper, the exact shade Cassian's mother had, the exact shade Cassian saw in the mirror every morning before he shaved his head close. But it was the eyes, Even from 20 yards away through the rain, the street lamp caught them. Piercing, intelligent, alert eyes. And then, the child in the stroller leaned forward, pointing at a dog passing by. A matching copper head, identical features, twins. They looked to be about 3 or 4 years old. The math hit Cassian with the precision of a sniper's round. He had been gone for 4 years and 2 months. Cassian, Ivana's voice was sharp now, tinged with worry. You're pale as a sheet. What is it? Is it a flashback? The car behind them honked, a long, aggressive blare. Cassian blinked, the image of the boys burning into his retinas. He forced his foot down, the Bronco lurching forward, moving past the intersection, past the woman, past the impossible reality standing on the corner of Bull Street. Cassian? Ivana reached for him. He gripped the wheel until the leather creaked. I thought I saw someone. He lied. The lie tasted like ash. Someone from my unit. In Savannah? Mistake, he rasped, his eyes checking the rearview mirror. Lyra and the boys were disappearing into the mist, walking away from him, just as he had once walked away from her. Just a mistake, my mind playing tricks. But Cassian Rourke knew one thing above all else. His mind might be scarred, but his eyes never lied. Those were his eyes looking back at him from the sidewalk. The drive to Ivana's parents' estate in Ardsley Park was usually a 10-minute cruise through oak-lined avenues. Tonight it felt like a lifetime. The silence in the car had shifted. It was no longer the comfortable silence of intimacy. It was the tense, pressurized silence of a submarine diving too deep. Cassian went through the motions. Signal, turn, brake. But his mind was disassembling the scene he had just witnessed, analyzing it with the cold detachment of his training, desperate to find a flaw in the data. Variable 1, Lyra Vexley. Status, ex-girlfriend. Relationship ended, 50 months ago. Reason, classified deployment, presumed fatal mission. Decision to cut ties to spare her the pain of waiting for a flag-draped coffin. Variable 2, the children. 2 males, monozygotic twins. Estimated age, 3 to 4 years. Variable 3, phenotype. Hair color, red gold, rare. Facial structure, strong jawline, distinct brow ridge, familial traits of the Rourke lineage. Conclusion, probability of coincidence is less than 0.01%. You're driving past the driveway, Ivana said softly. Cassian slammed the brakes, jerking the Bronco to a halt just past the wrought iron gates of the Hale estate. He swore under his breath, something he rarely did in front of her. Sorry, he muttered, reversing the truck. It's the rain. Can't see a thing. He pulled into the long driveway and parked. He didn't turn off the engine. Ivana unbuckled her seatbelt but didn't get out. She turned to him, her face bathed in the soft light of the porch lamps. She studied him with the scrutiny of a judge's daughter. You're not coming in, she stated. It wasn't a question. I have a migraine coming on, Cassian said, rubbing his temples. The lie was getting easier, which made him feel worse. The flickering lights at the intersection triggered it. I need to go home, take something, and sleep it off. I won't be good company tonight, Ev. Ivana looked at the ring on her finger, then back at him. Disappointment flashed in her eyes, followed by concern. You barely spoke after the intersection, Cass. If you need to talk about that time, you know I'm here. I know the anniversary of Operation Red Wings is coming up. She thought it was PTSD. She thought it was the war. It was the perfect cover, and using it made him feel like a coward. I know, he said, leaning over to kiss her cheek. His lips felt cold. I love you, Ivana. I just need tonight. I'll call you in the morning. Okay, she whispered. Drive safe. Text me when you're home. She stepped out, opening the umbrella. Cassian watched her walk to the door, unlock it, and wave before disappearing inside. She was safety. She was the future. He put the Bronco in reverse, backed out, and the moment he was on the main road, the facade crumbled. The calm, collected veteran vanished. He slammed his hand against the steering wheel. Damn it! He didn't turn toward his small bungalow on the outskirts of town. He spun the wheel hard to the left, heading back toward downtown. Back toward the rain, back toward the past. He needed intel. He couldn't confront her, not yet. He needed to know if he was crazy. He drove to the intersection of Bull and Broughton, empty. He circled the block. He knew Lyra's habits. Or at least he knew the habits of the girl he had loved 5 years ago. When it rained, she craved comfort, hot chocolate, old books. There was a bookstore cafe 3 blocks down, the Sentient Page. They used to spend hours there. He, reading tactical manuals or history. She, devouring Gothic romances. He parked illegally in a loading zone, killed the lights, and watched. The cafe was glowing warm and yellow against the blue night. Through the large glass window, misted with condensation, he saw movement. He reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a pair of compact binoculars. Standard kit he kept in the truck for birdwatching, his new hobby, or so he told people. He brought them to his eyes. There, in the back corner, near the children's section. Lyra was helping the boys out of their raincoats. Under the yellow rubber, they wore matching navy blue sweaters. One of them was holding a toy, a small gray plastic fighter jet. Cassian lowered the binoculars. His heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. The boy was playing with a fighter jet. Cassian remembered the night he left. He had left a small model plane on the nightstand. A jagged, sentimental souvenir he had carved himself. Was that it? No, this was plastic. But the symbolism choked him. He watched as Lyra sat down, looking exhausted. She rubbed her face with her hands. She looked older, yes, but stronger too. There was a steeliness in her posture that hadn't been there before. The Lyra he knew was soft, artistic, whimsical. This woman was a guardian. He had to go in. No. His training overrode his impulse. Reconnaissance first. Engagement second. If he walked in there now, bringing his storm into her sanctuary, she might run. She might scream. He needed to gauge the terrain. He watched for 20 minutes. He saw the way she laughed when one of the boys smeared whipped cream on his nose. He saw the way she constantly checked the door, her eyes scanning, a habit she must have picked up from him, or perhaps from fear. Then she stood up to leave. Cassian slumped low in his seat as they exited the shop. He watched them walk to a modest silver sedan parked down the street. She buckled them in. He noted the license plate. He noted the car had a dent in the rear bumper. He noted she looked tired, her shoulders slumping once the kids were in the car. As she drove past him, he saw her profile one last time. She was singing. He could tell by the movement of her jaw. She used to sing when she was nervous. Cassian followed her. He kept 2 cars between them, trailing her out of the historic district, past the manicured lawns, into a neighborhood that was working class, slightly worn around the edges. She pulled into the driveway of a small, single-story house with a screened-in porch. A tricycle sat in the yard, upturned by the wind. Cassian drove past, memorizing the address. He parked 2 streets over, turned off the engine, and stared at the digital clock on his dashboard. It was 9 p.m. He was engaged to be married. He was a veteran with a clean slate, and he was a father. The realization didn't come as a warm wave. It came as a terrifying clarity. He had abandoned a pregnant woman. He hadn't known, but ignorance didn't wash away the guilt. In the military, if you fire a round, you own where it lands, regardless of intent. He had fired the round of leaving her, and these boys were the impact crater. The next morning, the sun broke through the clouds over Savannah, steaming the pavement and turning the city into a sauna. The beauty of the place felt mocking to Cassian. He hadn't slept. He had spent the night sitting in his living room, staring at a wall, the television playing muted news. He had a plan. He always had a plan. At 800 hours, he texted Ivana. Migraine lifted, catching up on some backlog at the workshop. Might be late. Love you. He felt the corrosion of his integrity with every letter he typed. But he couldn't tell her. Not until he knew the truth. If he told Ivana, I think I have secret twins with my ex, his engagement, and her heart, would be collateral damage before he even confirmed the facts. At 8:30 he was parked down the street from Lyra's house. He watched as a neighbor, an elderly woman, came out to water her hydrangeas. He watched the mailman deliver a stack of envelopes. At 0900, the front door opened. Lyra came out, leading the boys. They were dressed for school or daycare, little backpacks with cartoon dinosaurs on them. Cassian waited until she buckled them into the car and drove off. He followed them to a small daycare center called Little Acorns. He watched the drop-off. The boys hugged her legs. She kissed their foreheads, lingering a second too long, as if she hated letting them go. Once she was back in her car, she didn't go to an office. She drove to a large garden center on the outskirts of town, Vexley Landscaping. She pulled on work gloves and started unloading trays of pansies from a delivery truck. She was working manual labor, hard labor. Cassian parked his Bronco in the customer lot. He took a deep breath, checked his reflection in the mirror. He looked tired, rugged but presentable, and stepped out. The gravel crunched under his boots. The smell of fertilizer and blooming roses filled the air. He walked through the rows of plants, his heart pounding a rhythm that drowned out the distant highway noise. He spotted her near the hydrangeas, her back to him, pruning dead leaves with quick, efficient snips. "Lyra," he said. He didn't mean for it to come out so soft, so broken. She froze. The shears in her hand stopped mid-air. She didn't turn around immediately. Her shoulders tensed, rising toward her ears. Slowly she turned. When her eyes met his, the color drained from her face so fast he thought she might faint. She dropped the shears. They clattered onto the concrete path. "Cassian," she whispered. It wasn't a greeting. It was a question of reality. She blinked rapidly. You're dead." The words hit him hard. "I'm not dead, Lyra." "No." She shook her head, taking a step back, her hands coming up as if to ward him off. "No, I got the letter. The letter said, well, you said if I didn't hear from you in 6 months, to move on, to assume the worst." "I said assume I wasn't coming back," Cassian corrected, his voice tight. "I didn't say I was dead. I said I couldn't be the man you needed." 4 years, Cassian." Her shock was instantly replaced by a flare of anger, hot and bright. 4 years of silence. You ghosted, you vanished. And now you just walk into my job? She looked around frantically to see if anyone was watching. "I saw you," Cassian said, stepping closer. "Last night, at the intersection." Lyra's eyes widened. She realized instantly what he had seen. She didn't try to lie. She didn't look away. She crossed her arms over her chest, a defensive wall built of reinforced steel. "You saw them," she stated flatly. "They have my eyes, Lyra. They have my mother's hair. They have my survival instinct," she shot back. "Are they mine?" The question hung in the humid air, heavy and absolute. Lyra laughed, a bitter, sharp sound. "Yours? You gave up ownership of anything in my life the day you left that note and disappeared into the desert. You don't get to come back and claim things." "I'm not claiming," Cassian said, his voice dropping, trying to de-escalate. "I'm asking for the truth. I did the math, Lyra. You were pregnant when I left. You had to be." She stared at him, her chest heaving. Tears pricked her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "Yes. I was 6 weeks along. I didn't know. I found out 2 weeks after you deployed on that final mission you couldn't talk about. Why didn't you write? Why didn't you contact the base?" "I tried," she shouted, causing a customer 2 aisles over to look up. She lowered her voice to a hiss. "I tried, Cassian. I called. They said you were on a deep cover assignment. Classified. No contact allowed. And then 6 months passed. No letter, no call. Just the silence you promised me. I thought you were dead or worse, that you had started a new life and forgotten us. I was in a darker place than death, Lyra," Cassian said, the memories of his captivity flashing briefly. The cold cell, the isolation, the months of recovery in a German hospital where he couldn't remember his own name, let alone hers. But he couldn't use that as an excuse. Not now. "Well," Lyra said, wiping her hands on her apron, "you survived. Congratulations. But you don't fit here anymore, Cassian. You're a ghost. Stay a ghost." "I can't do that," he said firmly. "Not if I have sons." "They don't know you," she said, her voice trembling. "They are happy. They are safe. Don't you dare come in here and wreck their lives just because your conscience is finally waking up." "I'm getting married," Cassian blurted out. The silence that followed was absolute. The birds stopped singing. The wind stopped blowing. Lyra looked at him, her expression shifting from anger to a profound, pitying sadness. "Married," she repeated. She looked at his left hand, seeing no ring yet, but sensing the truth of it. "Does she know?" "No." "God help her," Lyra whispered. She bent down and picked up her shears. "Go away, Cassian. Go marry your girl. Go live your simple life. You made your choice 4 years ago. Let me live mine." She turned her back on him and attacked a rosebush, snipping aggressively. Cassian stood there for a long moment. He wanted to reach out, to grab her shoulder, to explain the torture, the memory loss, the years of rehab. But he looked at the ferocity of her movements. She was a mother protecting her cubs from a predator. And right now, he was the predator. "I can't walk away, Lyra," he said to her back. "I walked away once. It was the biggest mistake of my life. I won't do it again." He turned and walked back to his truck, his mind clearer than it had been in years. The mission parameters had changed. The objective was no longer survival. It was redemption. But as he sat in his truck, he saw his phone light up. A text from Ivana. "Mom wants to know if you prefer salmon or steak for the wedding tasting menu next week. Also, I miss you." Cassian put his head in his hands. He was trapped between a future he had promised and a past that had never actually ended. And in the middle, 2 little boys with copper hair were playing with plastic fighter jets, unaware that their father had just returned from the dead. Cassian's workshop was a sanctuary built of cedar, sawdust, and solitude. Located in a repurposed warehouse in the Starland district, it smelled of varnish and hard work, a scent that usually settled his nerves. But today, the smell was suffocating. He stood over his workbench, a chisel in hand, staring at a piece of black walnut. He was supposed to be crafting a custom dining table for a client in Charleston, a commission that would pay his rent for 3 months. Instead, for the last 2 hours, he had been carving a small, intricate wooden wheel, a wheel for a toy truck. He set the chisel down, his hands trembling slightly. It wasn't the tremor of fear, it was the vibration of a suppressed soul, moral injury. That was the term his therapist at the VA had used a year ago. It was an educational concept that had changed Cassian's understanding of himself. He had learned that PTSD is a fear-based reaction, the body's alarm system stuck in the on position. But moral injury was different. It wasn't about fear, it was about shame. It was the psychological wound that occurs when a person does something, or fails to do something, that violates their deeply held moral beliefs. Abandoning a pregnant woman, even unknowingly, was a violation of Cassian's core code, the code of the seals. Leave no man behind. He had left 3 behind. The door to the workshop creaked open, letting in a slice of blinding afternoon sun. "I thought I'd find you hiding in here." Cassian jumped, his hand sweeping the small wooden wheel into his apron pocket. He turned to see Ivana standing in the doorway. She looked immaculate in a cream-colored sundress, holding 2 iced coffees. She was the picture of the life he was supposed to want, clean, bright, uncomplicated. "Ev," he said, forcing a smile that felt like it was made of cracked plaster. "I didn't hear you pull up. You were deep in thought," she said, walking over and handing him a cup. She looked around the shop, her eyes scanning the tools, the half-finished table, and the scattered sketches on his drafting board. "You missed lunch with my father." Cassian closed his eyes. "Damn, today was Tuesday." "It is," she said, her voice cool but not angry. "Yet." He waited for 30 minutes, Cass. "He wants to talk about the wedding venue deposits." "I'm sorry, Ivana, truly. I got caught up in the grain of this walnut. It's tricky wood. If you don't respect the grain, it splits." Ivana set her coffee down on a clean patch of the bench. She looked at him, her blue eyes searching his face with an intensity that made him want to confess everything right there. "You've been different since the rainstorm, Cassian," she said softly. "You're physically here, but your spirit is somewhere else." "Is it the wedding? Are you getting cold feet?" "No," he lied. "It's not us." "Then what is it? Because you're not sleeping. I see the timestamp on your texts. You're awake at 3 a.m., you're distracted, and now you're forgetting commitments." She stepped closer, placing her hands on his chest. "If it's the service, If it's memories coming back, we can delay. We can slow down. Her kindness was a dagger. She was offering him an out based on a lie. If he took it, he was manipulating her compassion. If he refused it, he had to explain the truth. "I just need a few days," he said, covering her hands with his. His palms were rough, calloused. Hers were soft. "I'm working through something. A logistical issue in my head. Give me until the weekend?" She studied him for a long moment, then sighed, leaning her forehead against his chest. "Okay, until the weekend. But Cass, don't shut me out. A marriage is a partnership, not a covert op. You don't have to protect me from your thoughts." "Yes, I do," he thought, "because my thoughts are currently filled with another woman and 2 boys who share my DNA." After she left, Cassian didn't go back to the table. He locked the shop, got into his Bronco, and did the one thing he knew he shouldn't do. He drove to the elementary school. He parked a block away, hidden by the draping Spanish moss of an old oak tree. It was pickup time. He needed to see them again. He needed to confirm that they were real, that he hadn't hallucinated the copper hair and the fierce eyes. He watched the parents line up. He saw Lyra's silver sedan pull up. The doors of the school opened, and a flood of children poured out. Cassian raised his binoculars. He found them. They were walking hand in hand. One boy, let's call him Twin A, was marching confidently, his backpack slung over one shoulder, talking animatedly to a teacher. The other, Twin B, was lagging behind, stopping to inspect a beetle on the sidewalk. Lyra got out of the car. She crouched down, opening her arms. Twin A ran into them, tackling her. Twin B took his time, walking over slowly, waiting for her to look at him before he leaned into her embrace. Cassian felt a lump form in his throat the size of a grenade. Twin B was him, the observer, the quiet one, the one who needed to be invited in. Twin A was the version of himself he projected to the world, the warrior, the leader. He watched Lyra wrestle them into the car seats. She looked exhausted. She rubbed her lower back as she stood up. She was doing this alone, every day. The baths, the meals, the nightmares, the fevers, the laughter. She was carrying the weight of the world, and he was sitting in a $50,000 truck worrying about a wedding tasting menu. He started the engine. He couldn't just watch. He had to act. But action required a strategy, and for the first time in his life, Cassian Rourke had no exit plan. Saturday in Savannah meant the Forsyth Park Farmers Market. It was a tradition Ivana loved: fresh peaches, local honey, artisanal soaps, and the social pageantry of seeing and being seen. Cassian had tried to get out of it, claiming a backlog of work, but Ivana had insisted. "It's good for your image," she had said. "People need to see the groom-to-be is actually alive." So there he was, wearing a crisp linen shirt that Ivana had picked out, carrying a woven basket filled with kale and sourdough bread. The famous Forsyth fountain sprayed mist into the air, creating rainbows that delighted the tourists. Cassian was on high alert. He scanned the crowd constantly. Savannah was a small city masquerading as a big one. The probability of an intercept was statistically significant. "Relax, Cass," Ivana laughed, linking her arm through his. "You look like you're guarding the president. Try a peach sample." He took the slice of fruit she offered, the sweetness cloying in his mouth. "It's good," he muttered. They walked past a stall selling handmade candles. Ivana stopped to chat with the vendor, a friend of her mother's. Cassian stepped back, his eyes wandering to the playground area adjacent to the market. And then his blood ran cold. Lyra was there. She was sitting on a park bench wearing denim shorts and a loose white blouse, her hair tied up in a messy bun. She was reading a book, one foot rocking a stroller back and forth. But the stroller was empty. The boys were on the jungle gym. "Cassian, are you listening?" Ivana asked, tugging his arm. "Yeah, candles, lavender. Sounds great," he said robotically. "I asked if you wanted to grab lunch at Collins Quarter after this." "Sure, whatever you want." He couldn't look away. One of the twins, the bold one, was climbing the highest slide. He was fearless. He stood at the top, shouting something to the wind. The other twin was sitting in the sandbox below, building something with intense concentration. Suddenly, The bold twin lost his footing. It happened in slow motion. His sneaker slipped on the metal rung. He tumbled backward. "Hey!" Cassian shouted, his voice booming across the park. Before he realized what he was doing, he had dropped the basket of kale and was sprinting. He cleared the low fence of the playground in a single fluid motion. The boy hit the mulch with a thud, followed by a wail of pain. Cassian was there before Lyra could even drop her book. He knelt beside the boy, his training taking over. "Don't move, buddy," Cassian said, his voice dropping to the calm, authoritative tone of a medic. "Let me check you out." The boy was crying, clutching his knee. He looked up at Cassian with tear-filled eyes that were a mirror image of Cassian's own. The shock of proximity was electric. "It hurts," the boy sobbed. I know, Cassian said, his hands gently probing the knee. "No blood. Bone looks good. You just banged it hard. You're tough though, right? You look tough." The boy sniffled, staring at the stranger who looked oddly familiar. "I'm a tiger," the boy whispered. "A tiger, huh?" Cassian smiled, a genuine heartbreaking smile. "Tigers have thick skin. Get away from him!" The scream came from behind. Lyra was there, breathless, panic etched into every feature. She shoved Cassian hard, pushing him away from her son. She scooped the boy into her arms, checking him frantically. "Leo, are you okay? Did you hit your head?" "I'm okay, Mama. The man helped me." Lyra looked up at Cassian. Her eyes were blazing with a mixture of terror and fury. "What are you doing?" she hissed, low enough so the crowd gathering wouldn't hear. "Are you stalking us?" Cassian stood up, raising his hands. "I was at the market. I saw him fall. It was instinct, Lyra." "Cassian?" The third voice broke the tension like a hammer on glass. Cassian turned. Ivana was standing at the playground gate. She was holding the abandoned basket of kale. Her face was pale, her eyes darting between Cassian, the frantic woman on the ground, and the two red-headed boys. She looked at Leo, the boy in Lyra's arms. Then she looked at the other boy, who had walked over from the sandbox to stand by his mother's leg. Then she looked at Cassian. The silence that stretched between the four adults, if you counted the growing awareness in Ivana's eyes, was deafening. "Is everyone okay?" Ivana asked, her voice trembling slightly. She walked into the playground enclosure. Lyra stood up, hoisting Leo onto her hip. She looked at Ivana, then at Cassian. For a second, Cassian thought she would scream the truth. He thought she would burn his world down right there in front of the organic honey stand. But Lyra Vexley had pride, and she had mercy. "We're fine," Lyra said, her voice clipped. "Just a scrape. Thank you for the help." She didn't look at Cassian. She looked at Ivana. "Your husband is very fast." "Fiancée," Ivana corrected automatically. "He's trained for emergencies." Lyra's jaw tightened. "Come on, boys. We're going." She grabbed the other twin's hand. "Say goodbye, Orion." The quiet twin, Orion, looked up at Cassian. He didn't speak. He just stared with a solemn intensity that unnerved Cassian more than the fall had. He gave a small, shy wave. Cassian waved back, his hand feeling heavy as lead. They watched Lyra hurry away, pushing the stroller with one hand, dragging two confused children with the other. Ivana stood still. She didn't move for a long time. When she finally turned to Cassian, her eyes were no longer confused. They were calculating. "She called you by your name," Ivana said. Cassian froze. "What?" "When she ran up, she didn't scream, 'Hey you,' or 'Get away.' She said, 'Get away from him.' But the look on her face. She knew you." Ivana took a step closer. "And those boys, Cassian. Those boys have your hair. Exactly your hair." "Ivana, don't be ridiculous." Cassian tried to laugh, but it sounded hollow. "It's a common color." "It's not," she snapped. "And you dropped everything and ran. You moved like a father." "I moved like a soldier seeing a civilian in danger," he argued. "Who is she?" Ivana demanded. "Don't lie to me. I swear to God, Cassian, if you lie to me right now, we are done." Cassian looked at the woman he had promised to marry. He respected her too much to give her a cheap lie, but he loved the boys too much to expose them yet. He was trapped in the DMZ, the demilitarized zone where any step triggers a mine. Her name is Lyra, Cassian admitted quietly. We dated. Years ago. Before the deployment before everything changed. And the boys? Ivana's voice cracked. I don't know, Cassian said. And in that moment, it was technically true. He didn't know via a DNA test. He just knew in his soul. I honestly don't know, Ivana. Ivana stared at him, tears welling up. You suspect, though. That's why you've been weird. That's why you were at the playground. She dropped the basket. The sourdough bread rolled onto the dirty mulch. I need to go home, she said. Alone. She turned and walked away, leaving Cassian standing in the middle of the playground, surrounded by the laughter of other people's children, realizing he had just successfully damaged everyone he cared about in under 5 minutes. The fallout was immediate and silent. Ivana didn't break off the engagement, but she went radio silent. She went to stay at her parents' beach house on Tybee Island, to think. Cassian was left alone in his bungalow with his ghosts. He needed guidance. He needed someone who understood the murky waters of duty, honor, and the gray areas in between. He drove to the outskirts of Savannah, to a small weathered house near the marshlands. This was the home of Major Elias Thorne, a retired Marine chaplain who had served 3 tours in Vietnam and 2 in the Gulf as a senior advisor. Elias was the man who had helped Cassian piece his mind back together after he returned from captivity. Elias was sitting on his porch, whittling a piece of driftwood. He didn't look up when Cassian walked up the steps. You look like you're carrying a rucksack full of rocks, son, Elias said, his voice raspy. Cassian sat on the steps, leaning his head against the railing. He told him everything. The rainstorm, the twins, the confrontation at the nursery, the disaster at the playground, the lie to Ivana. When he finished, the only sound was the buzzing of cicadas and the distant hum of a shrimp boat. You know what you're dealing with, don't you? Elias asked, pointing the knife at him. A mess, Cassian said. Moral injury, Elias corrected. He set the wood down. I've told you about this before. It's when your soul gets bruised because you violated your own conscience. You think you're a bad man because you left her. You think you're a bad man because you didn't know about the kids. And now you think you're a bad man because you're hurting Ivana. Am I wrong? Cassian asked. You're not bad, Cassian. You're wounded. There's a difference. Elias leaned forward. But here is the educational part, the part they don't teach in boot camp. The only way to treat a moral injury is through reparation. You have to fix what you broke. Not with money, not with excuses, with truth. The truth will destroy Ivana, Cassian said. The lie is already destroying her, Elias countered. She knows. Women always know. The question is, do you respect her enough to confirm it? And Lyra? She told me to stay away. She's protecting the perimeter, Elias said wisely. That's her job. Your job is to prove you're not a hostile force anymore. You can't just barge in and demand fatherhood rights. You have to earn the rank. You have to serve. Serve? Service, Elias nodded. Not as a SEAL, as a man. Find a way to help her without asking for anything in return. Show her you're safe, consistent, reliable. Those boys don't need a hero, Cassian. They need a dad who shows up. Even if it's just to fix a leaky faucet. Cassian looked at the old chaplain. It was simple advice, but profound. He had been trying to tactically acquire his place in their lives. He needed to surrender instead. You have a choice, Elias said, standing up. You can go back to Tybee Island, beg Ivana for forgiveness, and pretend those boys don't exist. You might even be happy for a few years, but eventually that rot will eat through the floorboards of your marriage. Or you face the fire. You accept that your life is messy. You tell Ivana the whole truth, regardless of the consequences. And you tell Lyra you aren't going anywhere. Cassian left Elias's house as the sun was setting, casting long purple shadows across the marsh. He felt a resolve he hadn't felt since his active duty days. He pulled out his phone. He was going to call Ivana. He was going to drive to Tybee and lay it all out. He dialed her number. It rang once, twice. Then a call waiting beeped in. He pulled the phone away. It was an unknown number. local area code. Cassian hesitated. Usually, he ignored these. But something, maybe the tiger instinct the little boy had mentioned, made him switch over. "This is Rourke," he answered. "Cassian?" The voice was breathless, panicked. It was Lyra. "Lyra, what's wrong?" He sat up straight in the driver's seat, his hand gripping the wheel. I didn't know who else to call." She was crying now, freely. "My car. It broke down on the connector. It's overheating. And Orion, he's burning up. He has a fever of 104. The ambulance says they are 20 minutes out because of a pileup. I'm scared, Cassian. He's convulsing." The world narrowed down to a single point. "Where are you exactly?" Cassian demanded, the engine of the Bronco already roaring to life. "Mile marker 4 on the I-16 ramp. I'm 5 minutes out. Keep him cool. Do not let him sleep. I'm coming." He hung up. He looked at the notification on his screen. Missed call, Ivana. He threw the phone onto the passenger seat. There was no choice. There never really was. Cassian Rourke slammed on the gas, the tires screeching against the asphalt as he raced toward the woman he had left behind and the son he was just beginning to know. The war was over, but the rescue mission had just begun. The shoulder of the I-16 connector was a dangerous strip of gravel and broken glass, illuminated only by the passing blur of headlights from cars refusing to slow down. Cassian's Bronco screeched to a halt behind Lyra's stalled sedan. He didn't bother checking traffic. He threw his door open and sprinted. The hazard lights of the sedan pulsed rhythmically, orange, black, lighting up the panic on Lyra's face. She was in the back seat, the door open, her body curved over the car seat. "He stopped shaking," Lyra screamed as Cassian reached her. "He stopped, but now he's so limp. Cassian, he's not waking up." Cassian pushed past the fear clawing at his throat and let the training take over. This wasn't his son right now. This was a patient. Airway, breathing, circulation. He leaned into the car. The heat inside was stifling. Orion was slumped in the car seat, his skin flushed a terrifying shade of crimson, his small chest rising and falling in shallow, rapid hitches. "Febrile seizure," Cassian said, his voice calm, cutting through Lyra's hysteria like a scalpel. "It's the fever spiking too fast. It looks terrifying, but usually it's not life-threatening if the airway is clear." He quickly unbuckled the straps. He lifted the boy out. Orion felt like a furnace against his arms. The boy was unconscious, in the post-ictal state, the deep sleep that follows a seizure. "Leo is scared," Lyra sobbed, gesturing to the other side of the car where the other twin sat, eyes wide, clutching his toy jet, silent tears streaming down his face. "Okay," Cassian commanded. "Grab Leo. Leave the car. We're taking the truck. The ambulance will get stuck in that gridlock behind us. We move. Now." Lyra didn't argue. She unbuckled Leo with trembling hands. Cassian carried Orion to the Bronco, laying him gently across the back seat, stripping off the boy's heavy sweater to help cool him down. He sat next to him. "You drive," Cassian shouted to Lyra, tossing her his keys. I'm shaking," she stammered. "Lyra!" He grabbed her shoulders for a split second, locking eyes with her. "You are a mother. You are the strongest thing on this planet. Drive the truck." She nodded, swallowed a sob, and climbed into the driver's seat. Leo scrambled into the back next to Cassian. As the Bronco roared onto the highway, weaving through the breakdown lane to bypass the traffic, Cassian focused entirely on Orion. He checked the pulse, rapid, bounding, but strong. He checked the airway, clear. "Hi," a small voice whispered. Cassian looked over. Leo was staring at him, terrified. "Is Orion broken?" Leo asked. Cassian reached out and squeezed Leo's small hand. "No, buddy. He just got too hot, like an engine. We just need to cool him down. He's going to be okay." Leo looked at Cassian's hand engulfing his own. "You came." "I came," Cassian confirmed, his throat tight. "Mama said nobody comes when it rains." The sentence hit Cassian harder than shrapnel. Mama said nobody comes when it rains. It was a window into the last 4 years, a portrait of isolation and self-reliance that Lyra had painted for them. "I'm here now," Cassian said, smoothing the damp copper hair back from Orion's forehead. and I'm not going anywhere. They reached the emergency bay of Memorial Health University Medical Center in record time. Cassian scooped Orion up and ran through the sliding glass doors, Lyra and Leo trailing close behind. "Pediatric emergency," Cassian announced to the triage nurse, not shouting, but projecting with a command presence that made the staff move instantly. "Male, approx 4 years old. Febrile seizure lasting approx 2 minutes. Postictal now. High temp." The medical team took Orion, placing him on a gurney and wheeling him behind the double doors. "Family only beyond this point," the nurse said, blocking the way. Lyra rushed forward. "I'm his mother." The nurse looked at Cassian. "Are you the father?" The world seemed to pause. The fluorescent lights hummed. The smell of antiseptic stung his nose. Lyra stopped, turning to look at him. She looked small, fragile, and utterly exhausted. "Yes," Cassian said firmly. "I am." Lyra didn't correct him. She didn't fight him. She just exhaled, a long, shuddering breath, and nodded. 2 hours later, the crisis had abated. Orion was sleeping in a private room, an IV line in his small arm delivering fluids and medication to lower the fever. It was a viral infection, the doctor had said, common, fast spiking and triggering the seizure. He would be fine by morning. The adrenaline had faded, leaving behind a heavy, exhausting silence. Leo was asleep on a waiting room chair, curled up under Cassian's denim jacket. Cassian and Lyra stood by the vending machines in the hallway, clutching cups of terrible hospital coffee as if they were life rafts. "You were good back there," Lyra said softly, staring into her cup. "You knew exactly what to do." "Combat medicine covers a lot of ground," Cassian murmured, "but it's different when it's your own." He leaned against the wall, looking at her. Under the harsh hospital lights, he could see the fine lines of stress around her eyes, the gray hairs hidden in her curls. "Why, Lyra?" he asked. The anger was gone, replaced by a desperate need to understand. "Why didn't you tell me, even if you thought I wouldn't come back? Why keep them a secret?" Lyra took a sip of coffee, wincing at the heat. She looked at the sleeping Leo down the hall. "It wasn't about punishing you, Cassian," she began, her voice steady. "It was about survival, hyper-independence. That's what my therapist calls it. Educational," Cassian muttered dryly. "It is," she said. "When you left, I fell apart. Not just a little. Completely. I lost my job because I couldn't get out of bed. Then I found out I was pregnant with twins. I was alone, broke, and heartbroken. I called the Navy. They stonewalled me. I waited 6 months. No letter. I wrote it," Cassian insisted. "I believe you," she said, "but I never got it, so I had a choice. I could spend my pregnancy waiting for a ghost, hoping a man who walked away would come back and save me, or I could build a fortress." She turned to him, her eyes fierce. "I decided that I would never, ever need anyone again. I built a life where I was the provider, the protector, and the nurturer. I convinced myself that you were dead because grieving a dead hero is easier than hating a living deserter. I didn't desert you," Cassian said, his voice cracking. "I was captured, Lyra. I spent 18 months in a hole in the ground." Lyra's cup shook in her hand. She looked at him, really looked at him, seeing the scars she hadn't noticed before, the way he stood with his back to the wall, the haunted depth in his eyes. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I'm so sorry, Cassian." "We both have scars," he said, stepping closer. "But Lyra, that fortress you built, it kept you safe, but it kept me out, and it almost kept me from saving him tonight." "I know," she admitted. "When I saw the car stall, and I looked at my phone, I realized I couldn't do it alone anymore. My fortress was burning down." "Let it burn," Cassian said intensely. "You don't have to do this alone. I want to be there. Not just for the emergencies, for the Tuesdays, for the scraped knees." Lyra looked at him with a mixture of hope and fear. "It's complicated, Cassian. You have a fiancée. You have a life that doesn't include juice boxes and tantrums." "Ivana," Cassian breathed. The name felt foreign on his tongue. In the chaos of the last 3 hours, he had completely forgotten to call her back. He reached for his pocket, but his phone wasn't there. He had thrown it on the passenger seat of the Bronco. She's a good woman, Lyra said quietly. I saw her at the park. She loves you. She looked at you the way I used to. Lyra, don't. She stopped him. Don't make promises right now. You are high on adrenaline and guilt. Go handle your life, Cassian. Orion is safe. I can handle the night shift. I'm not leaving. You have to, she said. You can't start a new life with us while the old one is still wearing your ring. She was right. The logic was undeniable. But before Cassian could respond, the elevator doors at the end of the hallway chimed open. The sound of heels clicking on the linoleum floor echoed in the quiet corridor. Cassian turned. Ivana was walking toward them. She was still wearing her beach cover-up and sandals, her hair windblown from the drive from Tybee Island. She held Cassian's phone in her hand. She didn't look angry. She looked devastated. The hallway felt like a vacuum, sucking the air out of the room. Ivana stopped 10 feet away. She looked at Lyra, who instinctively crossed her arms. She looked at Cassian. Then she looked through the open door of the waiting room where Leo was sleeping under Cassian's jacket. I tracked your phone, Ivana said, her voice devoid of emotion. I thought you had been in an accident. I saw the Bronco parked in the emergency bay. Ivana, Cassian stepped forward, hands raised. Let me explain. You don't have to, she said, holding up the phone. I saw the text on the screen from the hospital registration. Update on patient Orion Rourke. She lowered the phone. Rourke, you gave him your name. He is my son, Ivana, Cassian said. There was no point in softening the blow anymore. The truth was, the only thing left. They both are. I didn't know until this week. I swear to you. Ivana looked at Lyra. Is that true? He didn't know? Lyra nodded, stepping forward slightly. He didn't know. I kept them hidden. He only found out when he saw us at the crosswalk. Ivana closed her eyes, a single tear escaping. She let out a laugh that sounded more like a sob. The crosswalk. That's when you left me, Cassian. You were sitting right next to me in the car, but you left me at that red light. I tried to stay, Cassian said, his voice thick with regret. I tried to be the man I promised you, but I can't ignore this, Ev. I can't turn off being a father. I know you can't, Ivana said. She looked at him with a profound sadness. That's why I fell in love with you. Because you are a man of duty. A man who protects. She took a deep breath and looked around the sterile hospital hallway. But I can't be a spectator in my own marriage, Cassian. I can't be the woman waiting at home while you figure out how to be a father to another woman's children. I'm not that strong. And I don't want to be that bitter. She looked down at her left hand. The diamond ring caught the fluorescent light, sparkling coldly. Slowly, deliberately, she slid the ring off her finger. Ivana, wait, Cassian said, panic rising. We can talk about this. We can figure it out. No, we can't, she said, reaching out and taking his hand. She pressed the ring into his palm and closed his fingers over it. The metal was still warm from her skin. This is the sunk cost fallacy, Cassian, she said, her voice shaking. We think just because we invested time and love, we have to keep going. But the cost of staying is too high. For both of us. She looked at Lyra. He's a good man. He's damaged and he's complicated, but he's good. Don't punish him for surviving. Lyra looked stunned. I won't. Ivana turned back to Cassian. She stood on her tiptoes and kissed his cheek softly. It was a goodbye kiss. Go be a dad, Cassian, she whispered. It's the mission you were actually made for. She turned and walked back toward the elevators, her back straight, her dignity intact, leaving Cassian standing in the hallway, holding a diamond ring that suddenly felt heavier than any weapon he had ever carried. Cassian watched the elevator doors close, severing the last tie to the simple life he thought he wanted. He turned to look at Lyra. She was leaning against the wall, tears silent on her cheeks. She's right, Lyra said. About what? That you're a good man. Cassian looked at the ring in his hand, then shoved it into his pocket. He didn't feel good. He felt like he had just survived a bomb blast, alive, but ringing with the shock of what was destroyed. But then, a nurse poked her head out of Orion's room. Mr. Rourke, the little one is waking up. He's asking for his dad. The words cut through the grief. He's asking for his dad. Cassian looked at Lyra. She nodded toward the door. Go. He walked into the room. Orion was blinking groggily, his face pale but cooler. When he saw Cassian, his eyes lit up. Those fierce, intelligent eyes that mirrored Cassian's own. You stayed, Orion rasped. I told you, Cassian said, pulling a chair close to the bed and taking the small hand. I'm not going anywhere. For the first time in 4 years, Cassian Rourke wasn't looking for an exit strategy. He was exactly where he needed to be. The weeks following the incident at the hospital were not filled with grand romantic gestures or cinematic reunions. They were filled with the quiet, grinding friction of realignment. Ivana had left Savannah. She sent a text 2 days after the hospital. I'm going to Europe for a while. Don't write, don't call. Let me heal. Be a good father. Cassian respected the silence. It was the least he could do for the woman who had been the casualty of his past. Now Cassian found himself in a new kind of boot camp. He wasn't fighting insurgents. He was fighting the accumulated sediment of 4 years of absence. He showed up at Lyra's house every day at 5 p.m. Not to sleep over. He slept at his workshop on a cot, but to work. He fixed the screen door that slammed. He repaired the leaking gutter that had rotted the eaves. He built a proper toy chest for the living room so the fighter jets and plastic dinosaurs weren't potential landmines for bare feet. Lyra watched him with a wary suspicion that slowly, day by day, began to thaw into a hesitant curiosity. She didn't offer him dinner for the first 2 weeks. She just let him work, watching him interact with the boys. One humid Tuesday, Cassian was under the sink, wrenching a rusted pipe. Leo and Orion were sitting on the floor nearby, watching him with the intense fascination children have for mechanics. Why is your arm painted? Leo asked, pointing to the sleeve of tattoos on Cassian's forearm. Ink that told the story of his platoon. It's not paint, Leo. Cassian grunted, tightening a bolt. It's a map. A treasure map? Orion asked, eyes wide. Cassian slid out from under the sink, wiping grease on a rag. He looked at his sons. Sort of. It's a map of where I've been, so I don't forget. Did you get lost? Leo asked. Mama says men get lost easy. Cassian looked up at Lyra, who was leaning against the counter, chopping carrots. She didn't look away. Yeah, Cassian said, holding Lyra's gaze. I got lost for a long time, but I had a compass that pointed me back. What compass? Orion asked. You, Cassian said. I just didn't know it was you until I saw the yellow raincoats. The boys giggled, not fully understanding the weight of the metaphor. But Lyra understood. She set the knife down. Dinner is in 10 minutes, she said softly. There's enough for 4, if you want to stay. It was the first invitation, a peace treaty offered over chopped carrots. That night, they ate together. It was chaotic. Milk was spilled. Orion refused to eat his peas. Leo told a long, rambling story about a squirrel. Through it all, Cassian sat at the head of the small, wobbling table, feeling a sense of purpose he hadn't felt since he was a team leader. But there was still a shadow in the room, the ghost of the letter. After the boys were bathed and put to bed, a ritual Cassian was learning to love, he and Lyra sat on the back porch. The cicadas were screaming in the dark. We need to talk about the gap, Cassian said. He was holding a small battered metal box on his lap. I don't know if I want to rehash it, Cass. Lyra sighed, wrapping her cardigan tighter around herself. We are moving forward. Isn't that enough? No, Cassian said firmly. Because you still think I chose not to contact you. You think I got the news of the pregnancy and ghosted. You think I'm a coward. I think you were a man at war, she said diplomatically. I was. Cassian nodded. But I need you to see this. He opened the metal box. It smelled of old paper and desert dust. Inside were his dog tags, a few medals he never wore, a carved piece of wood, and a stack of envelopes wrapped in a rubber band. He pulled one envelope out. It was crumpled, stained with something dark that looked like dried coffee or blood, and stamped with red ink. He handed it to her. Lyra took it. Her hands shook. She read the address. Lyra Vexley, 404, Abercorn St. Savannah, GA. Then she read the red stamp across the front. Return to sender, unclaimed, undeliverable, and below that, a military stamp, Unit, redeployed, communications blackout. I wrote that the night before the mission went bad, Cassian said, his voice rough. I gave it to the comms officer, but we were hit an hour later. The mailbag was recovered, but by the time it got back to base, I was already listed as MIA. They tried to send it to you, but you had moved. Lyra stared at the envelope. I moved 3 weeks after you left. I couldn't afford the rent on Abercorn anymore. And because I was in a hole in the ground in the Hindu Kush, I couldn't call to ask for your new address. And by the time I was rescued, 18 months later, I had a traumatic brain injury and no memory of who I was, let alone where you lived. Lyra tore open the envelope. The paper inside was brittle. She read the words he had written 4 years ago. Lyra, if you are reading this, it means I'm not there to say it. I'm scared, Lee. Not of the dying part, but of the living without you part. I have a feeling this is the last run. If I make it back, I'm done. I'm coming home to marry you. I bought a ring. It's in my locker. Wait for me. Please, just wait a little longer. Forever, Cass. Lyra made a sound that was half gasp, half sob. She pressed the letter to her chest, rocking back and forth. The narrative she had told herself for 4 years, that she was unlovable, that she was easy to leave, that she wasn't worth a postage stamp, shattered. You wanted to come back, she whispered. It was the only thing that kept me alive, Cassian said. He reached out and took her hand. The thought of you was the only food I had. Lyra looked at him, tears streaming down her face, washing away the last of the bitterness. I'm sorry, she choked out. I'm so sorry I doubted you. Don't be, Cassian said, pulling her into his arms. You were protecting the perimeter. You were keeping our boys safe. You did your job, Lyra. Now let me do mine. The concept of post-traumatic growth is the psychological theory that people who endure psychological struggle can see positive growth afterward. It's not about bouncing back to who you were. It's about bouncing forward to someone new. Cassian Rourke didn't become the man he was before the war. That man was gone. He became someone better. 6 months later, the vintage Ford Bronco was gone. Cassian had sold it to pay for a down payment on a house, a fixer-upper with a big yard in a school district that had a great special needs program for Orion's speech therapy. He drove a sensible pickup truck now, with 2 car seats permanently installed in the back. He and Lyra weren't married yet. They were taking it slow, dating in reverse. They did movie nights. They went to counseling, both individually and together. They were building a foundation of concrete, not sand. But on this particular Sunday, the sky over Savannah was that same bruised purple it had been on the night of the rainstorm. Where are we going? Lyra asked, buckling her seatbelt. The boys were in the back, singing along to a Disney soundtrack that Cassian now knew by heart. A detour, Cassian smiled. He drove them downtown. The rain started to fall, a gentle drizzle this time. He pulled up to the intersection of Bull and Broughton. The traffic light blinked yellow. This is it, Lyra said softly, recognizing the spot. The extraction point, Cassian nodded. He put the truck in park. I want to rewrite the memory. He got out, opened her door, and then got the boys out. They stood on the corner, the rain misting their faces. This is where I saw you, Cassian told the boys, crouching down to their eye level. I was sitting right there in a car, and I saw you guys walking. And you know what I thought? What? Leo asked, jumping in a puddle. I thought, there goes my whole world. Cassian lied. Well, it was a retrospective truth. He stood up and took Lyra's hand. He didn't have a ring. Not yet. He had sold the one he bought for Ivana, donating the money to a veterans charity as a way to cleanse the karma. The ring for Lyra would be new, carved from wood he selected himself, when the time was right. Cross with me, he said to her. Where are we going? She asked, smiling. To the other side, he said. They stepped onto the crosswalk. Lyra on his left, the boys holding his right hand. They walked across the street, not as ghosts, not as memories, but as a family. As they reached the other side, the sun broke through the clouds, illuminating the wet pavement. Cassian looked back at the intersection one last time. He saw the ghost of his former self, the lonely, hardened soldier sitting in the Bronco, terrified of the future. He gave that ghost a nod of forgiveness. War defines what you are willing to die for, Cassian thought, lifting Orion onto his shoulders. But family defines what you are willing to live for. He turned his back on the street and walked his fiancée and his sons toward the ice cream shop down the block. The mission was accomplished.